consensus. We regret the fact that they don't seem to be real progress thus far, and because of that, we are very supportive of the ideas as expressed by Dr. Nolin Hazer as Special Envoy of the UN SecGen, that we should have a proper framework on the implementation. Malaysia will present some of our ideas on the framework during the next meeting of the foreign ministers, which will be held on the 3rd of August in Phnom Penh. Suffice for me to say that the key element of the framework is there must be an end game. You have to have an end game. What is the end game of the 5-point consensus? And that is something that we will have to discuss in more detail at the foreign ministers meeting in Phnom Penh. Now, the second point that I want to raise is on the execution of the 4 activists. We condemn the action by the junta to execute the 4 activists. We feel that this is a crime against humanity. I believe the foreign ministers, when we meet in Phnom Penh on the 3rd of August, will look into this. Well, regardless of the timing, but more importantly, this takes place about less than 2 weeks after the Special Envoy visited Naypyidaw, and just about a week before the ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting in Phnom Penh. So we look at it that as if the junta is making a mockery of the 5-point consensus, and I think we really have to look at this very, very seriously. However, having said that, the actual work on trying to implement the 5-point consensus must go on and probably should be strengthened with some kind of a framework to ensure that there is an end game and we have proper items and processes to take it forward. So those are the 2 points that I want to raise this afternoon, and I would like to welcome Dr. Nolin.
Thank you, YB Datuk Sri. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Nolin Hazer to give her remarks.
A very good afternoon, members of the media. I'm on a 2-day mission to Kuala Lumpur at the very kind invitation of His Excellency Foreign Minister Saifuddin Abdullah. So thank you, Foreign Minister, for your very warm reception and for your role in ASEAN as regards the situation in Myanmar. I would like also to express my appreciation to the people and government of Malaysia for hosting the largest Rohingya refugee population in ASEAN. I had a very productive discussion with Foreign Minister on the situation in Myanmar. So let me first echo the United Nations Secretary General's strong condemnation of the execution of the pro-democracy leaders by the military. It is a blatant violation to the right to life, liberty, and security of person. My discussion with Datuk Sri touched on the setback of this execution on the ASEAN efforts, including the 5-point consensus, as expressed in the statement of the ASEAN chair. We focus on concrete areas of cooperation with the UN Special Envoy, as requested by the ASEAN Head of States and Foreign Ministers. Moving forward, I stressed the urgency for inclusive engagement. For inclusive engagement in order to work towards the will of the people. With regards to discussions on the Rohingya people, I focused on education to prevent a lost generation of Rohingya refugees and other displaced persons from Myanmar, and the importance of legal employment and protection for Myanmar migrant workers and refugees in Malaysia. Nearly 5 years after the mass forced displacement of Rohingya and other communities from Rakhine State in Myanmar, I highlighted the need for innovative thinking to break the impasse and to strengthen the support for the Rohingya and the host communities from countries in the region and across the international community. I stressed that ultimately it was Myanmar's responsibility to address the underlying issues affecting the Rohingya and to establish durable solutions for the voluntary, safe, dignified, and sustainable return of all refugees, as well as forcibly displaced persons. I recognize Malaysia's major role within ASEAN as a member of the OIC and in the vice presidency of the 77th session of the UN's General Assembly. So ahead of the ASEAN's foreign ministers meeting in early August, we discussed the need for ASEAN's foreign ministers to keep the Rohingya issue high on the agenda and to support the implementation of the recommendation of the Advisory Commission on Rakhine State. Now, before my visit to Bangladesh in late August, I highlighted the important cooperation with Bangladesh, host of 1.2 million refugees and bearing a disproportionate burden that the international community, regionally and abroad, has a responsibility to help to address, including through support for quality and inclusive education for refugees and local communities. Now, ahead of the Transforming Education Summit in New York on the 19th of September, I emphasized that education was a fundamental right of Rohingya people with long-term ramifications for the region. As I discussed recently with the permanent representatives of the OIC contact group on the Rohingya crisis and highlighted in my briefing to the UN General Assembly, we need swift measures to prevent a lost generation by providing Rohingya and others educational opportunities, including abroad. Now, amidst the halting progress over the last 5 years, the desperate situation continues to drive Rohingya people to undertake dangerous sea and land journeys. There is therefore an urgent need for innovative strategies and concrete pathways aligned with the needs and will of the Rohingya people. So my message is very clear. We must not allow the Rohingya people's sense of being forgotten and abandoned to take root. Their right to live in dignity as human beings must be supported and safeguarded by all, including the international community. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hazer, for your remarks. So, ladies and gentlemen, members of the media, now we would like to open the floor for the Q&A session. So we will alternately accept questions from the media who are physically present here first, followed by the one online. So to all members of the media who are present here, you may raise your hand, introduce yourself and your media agency. You may use the microphone provided.
Long time no see.
Hi. Okay, can you give us a little bit more about August 3rd? What sort of framework you're looking at? I know there's no deadline on the implementation of the 5-point. So can you give us a little bit more, given the urgency of situation with the execution of the 4 activists?
Okay. We have the foreign ministers, ASEAN foreign ministers meeting in Phnom Penh on the 3rd of August. We all know what the 5-point consensus is. The 5-point consensus does not outline clear milestone as to who are the stakeholders that needs to be engaged and the NUG, the chair of the NUCC, and a couple of others. And we have said this long time ago that ASEAN should also be engaging the NUG and the NUCC, among others, besides the junta. But now I think it is even more pressing that we should meet the NUG and the NUCC and probably other stakeholders too. We need to expedite the meeting, and we should inform the public as and when we have the meeting. We understand that some discussions may not be conducive to be shared with everyone, but at least there is some progress as to the stakeholders that we are meeting. I use the term endgame. I think we all understand that whatever it is, it has to be Myanmar-led, Myanmar-owned, and we are acting as facilitators from outside. But as far as I understand it from the meetings that I have had, I think the end game that they want, the people of Myanmar want, is a Myanmar that is democratic, inclusive, fair, as many stakeholders as possible, including the NUG and the NUCC.
I think from my side, one of the mandates that I have is to complement the work of ASEAN as the UN Special Envoy. And I mentioned to Dato Sri that I have tried my very best to complement what is in the 5-point consensus, but also to go beyond it. So I have addressed the humanitarian issues, and we discussed very strongly how that should be implemented, and that has to use all channels that are available to deliver to the people in need, especially the internally displaced people that has now reached over 1 million. And to go even beyond that, to realize that this is a multi-dimensional crisis that is very much linked also to the weakening of state institutions and the economy. And therefore, what we are seeing in terms of the figures is that now we have something like about 50% of the population living in poverty. And the figures from the World Bank put it at 40%, but depending very much on the figures and the line, the poverty line that you're using. But I've also stressed that one of the exit strategies is to return to civilian rule, but how do we do that? It has to be based on the will of the people and through the inclusive consultation and engagement that Dato Sri and I have also been discussing. The next issue, what is it that the people want? And at the end of the day, it is effective democratic governance that can deliver the welfare, the well-being, and the aspiration of the people, especially the young. They want a new future. And that is something that we all need as a region to ensure that that can happen. I've also addressed the issue, and I said it in my statement, on the Rohingya. But I have also used, in terms of moving forward, what I call my 3 concentric circles. So at the center of it, yes, it has to be Myanmar-led, but based on the will of and the aspiration of the people. And let's not forget that. The second circle would be, let's try to build greater regional unity on what's possible in terms of moving forward. But this should not just be the responsibility of ASEAN. It also has got to be the responsibility of the neighboring countries that share long borders with Myanmar. And the third circle would be the international community. How do we ensure that there's greater coordination and coordinated strategy to ensure that the people of Myanmar deserve and get the future that they want?
Thank you. Next, we would like to welcome questions from the media who are present via virtual platform Zoom. So you may use the raise hand feature to ask question. Introduce yourself and your media agency. If there is none, so we can proceed with the. Yeah.
I don't think that we can answer that for her own security. Thank you.
But when's the last time you spoke?
I can't reveal that to you.
But is there a reason for concern for her health situation?
Well, from whatever that has come out, obviously we are getting some news. Yeah.
Positive news or?
Can we go to the next question?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And then, let's do Myanmar first. Okay. Yeah. There's Eileen.
Yes, hi Dato and Dr. Noreen. I just want to ask you, what do you think the international community can do to prevent more executions by the junta, and what sort of impact will it have on ASEAN push for dialogue between all sides? Thank you.
Well, we hope we have seen the last of the execution, and we will try to use whatever channel that we can to try and ensure that this will not happen again. Yeah, but at the same time, we have to show a strong signal that we are not happy with what happened. Ada soalan lain?
Datuk Sri, we have a question in the chat box from Ms. Florence Lui from Al Jazeera. So her question is that you've talked about what you like to see happen and endgame to the 5-point consensus. The question is, how are you going to persuade the junta to be on the same page as you when the international diplomacy seems to have failed?
Well, I was just outlining very briefly what we are thinking, and this is mainly based on what we have been hearing from the many stakeholders that we have been engaged with. The next step is, of course, to see how this can be implemented. I believe there are ways and means to do it. Probably it's still premature to say it out in the open. But at least we have a plan. Yeah. Okay.
Betul Seri, berkenaan dengan isu kerangka 5 point ni, adakah keperluan untuk beri tekanan dari segi ekonomi, sanctions?
Ada banyak idea tentang sanction dan sebagainya yang telah disebutkan oleh pihak-pihak yang lain. Kita di ASEAN harus melihat dengan teliti apa sebenarnya yang boleh dilakukan oleh ASEAN dan apa yang boleh dilakukan oleh komuniti antarabangsa. Yang paling mustahak ialah kerjasama antara ASEAN dengan komuniti antarabangsa. Misalnya antara Special Envoy of ASEAN dengan Special Envoy of the Sekjen of the UN misalnya. Macam yang disebut oleh Dr. Nolin tadi, kita complement each other dari segi apa yang kita laksanakan. Isu ni sangat kompleks dan tak ada jalan pintas, tapi sekurang-kurangnya harus ada kerangka yang jelas apa yang akhirnya kita hendak, yang saya sebut the end game, dan bagaimana harus bermula dengan an inclusive and fair consultation between all of the key stakeholders. Yeah. Alright. Habis dah?
Yeah.
Myanmar? Okay.
We are moving closer or further towards the end game?
We don't know. The execution shows that, you see, the problem is with the execution, well, I haven't heard yet. This just happened. I have not heard from the other stakeholders how they are feeling about it. And I thought we regret, as I said, we condemn it. It should not happen anymore, because if this continue to happen, then it will stall whatever possible talks between all the stakeholders. So the execution is definitely not in the right direction.
Mengenai soal dua rakyat Malaysia ditahan di Indonesia sebab disyaki pengintai. Jadi boleh
Yang ni biar menteri lain jawab lah. Yeah, okay. All right, last question.
Yeah, Datuk Sri, last question we have from Yuchi Nita from Nikkei Asia. The United States called for stronger pressure, especially on economy. What is your view, whether it can happen individually as Malaysia or collectively in ASEAN?
No, we welcome efforts by all of our dialogue partners. But as I said, we really have to sit down and discuss those matters. What is A, what is B, what is C, because at the end of the day, we want to achieve the end game. And there is this situation, as mentioned by Dr. Nolin, 50% or about that of the Myanmar population is living under poverty. So humanitarian is like premium. It has to be carried out as quickly as possible. Remember, rainy season is coming. Things will get worse. So as we go on with the 5-point one of the point under the 5-point consensus is humanitarian assistance. So we have to get that off the ground. Yeah. Okay.
So ladies and
Yes.
gentlemen, as time. Okay.
Berkaitan dengan isu radikalisme yang apa yang tadi Datuk saya ada mention tadi.
Itu kena tanya Dr. Wan Junaidi lah. Biarlah, biar Dr. Wan Junaidi. Okay, thank you.
So ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our joint press conference for today. So announcing the departure of YB Datuk Sri Saifuddin Abdullah, Minister of Foreign Affairs Malaysia, and Dr. Nolin Hazer, the Special Envoy to the United Nations Secretary General on Myanmar. Thank you.